We have been talking about doing a show together for a super long time, and now we're finally here.
The planets have aligned.
Thanks, white supremacy.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Because Language, a podcast about linguistics, the science of language. My name's Daniel Midgley, and with me now, Benjamin Ainsley.
Good appropriate time characteristic for whenever it is that you're listening to this, person who is listening to this.
Thank you. Also with us is doctoral student Kelly Wright of the University of Michigan. Hi, Kelly.
Hello.
Now, tell us a little bit about your work, because you've been doing a lot of stuff lately. You've been doing a swag of media things about the intersection of language, racism, profiling, the racialization of language. Tell me about your work and how those things combine.
Okay, so yeah, I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Michigan in experimental sociolinguistics. So what that means is I'm critically interested in questions about how our think meat, right? Like the language system in the brain.
Think meat, yes.
Think meat. That's the German word.
If I learn nothing else from this show, and I really hope that I still do, that is still, I'm sorted. Think meat.
Think meat.
That goes in the vault.
I am feeling really insecure about German because we've got some German stuff coming up. And if you say that, I will just believe you. Okay.
Good. Yeah, so I'm interested in how our brain interfaces with social structure. So the things in the society that are outside the brain and how that affects language change over time. And the way that I test those theories is with various experimental methods. So I have done some machine learning on a large corpus that I built of sports journalism, looking at how Black athletes are described differently than white athletes, and using lots of fancy math to show that that is true. And
awesome.
Yeah, I've worked on discrimination in the housing market, so voice-based discrimination in the United States. Legally, discrimination has to occur with physical proximity. I have to stand in front of you for you to hear that I'm a woman or a Black person, or to know that. So my research shows that this happens with the voice alone. And I also work on slurs, so how bad words become bad over time.
Yeah, okay.
I have so many questions, but I am going to hold on to all of them for now.
I just want to ask, you've been bouncing around the podcast circuit. You've done Vocal Fries, you've done Lexis, Unstandardized English, I forget who else. And now you're doing us. You're on Because Language. Are you enjoying all of this? Is it fun? Or have you got the bug?
I love it. Yes. I think it's great. I'm really committed to making science consumable for various publics. And so I think the spoken medium is the way to do that.
Can I set you a really quick challenge, Kelly? Mm-hmm. So you just gave us the very sort of polished, I've been on some podcasts, this is what I'm about. Can I challenge you to I'm at a party with you, you're 3 drinks in, so you're feeling a little bit feisty. And I'm so what do you do? And can you give me your 30-second, all right, fucking here it is, buddy.
Yeah, I researched why you're racist.
I was so hoping it would be that. Yes, I love it.
That wasn't 30 seconds.
I know.
No, you know what? And she's like, and I got 27 seconds spare to prove that you are.
Pulls out graph. Don't think I don't take graphs to parties, because I do.
Yeah, okay.
I've got visual aids.
Our last episode was a bonus mailbag in which Ben and I talked about questions from our listeners, our dear listeners, and I'm kind of proud of a term that I invented.
Remember the one? Sorry, I have to cast my mind way back.
What do you call it when somebody changes a word to make it kind of to make it an insult like Democrats or conservatives.
An antagonism. No, what was it? Oh, help me.
An antagonym.
An antagonym, that's right. Very good.
I'm proud of that.
Very good. Bravo, sir. Brava.
Well, if you'd like to hear some other questions, some answers to other questions, that's in our episode. And we've got a lot of these bonus episodes. If you want to hear them right as they come out, why don't you head over to patreon.com/becauselangpod. And you'll be supporting the show, getting some bonus extras, helping us pay for all of this stuff. And we really, really, really appreciate the support from all of you. Thanks all. Mwah.
Before we get completely stuck into Kelly's work, which I am chomping at the bit to do, can we quickly do like a whirlwind tour of what's in the news this week?
Okay, very quick. Adam sent me this one on Facebook. This is a website or a tool or software that allows you to clone your voice so that you can type stuff and then hear yourself reading it, which seems like a lot more work than just saying it. But
yeah, it's like adding a few steps here, but okay.
But it's also kind of fun. So this is resemble.ai. And I tried it. I read out 50 different passages. No, actually, I read out 100. They say you can stop at 50, but I doubled that. I doubled down, did 100. Mm-hmm. And then you can type in stuff, and I've sent you a clip. So let's listen. You can tell me if this sounds like me.
All right, here we go. Computer Daniel.
Darug is a language of coastal New South Wales. And of course, because it's been the International Year of Indigenous Languages, a lot of funding from the government of Australia and other countries has become available. So this is one of the fruits of it.
I would 100% believe that this is you if you had just come back from dental surgery.
Okay.
Like, it clearly does have aspects of you. Like, there's no mistaking that. Like, if a random person played that audio for me, I would legitimately immediately say to them, that sounds like my friend Daniel Midgley, but that he's been to the dentist and a part of his mouth has been numbed.
Yeah, the first time I listened, it sounded like, oh, that's a computer voice. And then the second time I listened, I thought, there are some identifiably interesting bits that sound like me. Like, it's got moments.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Your brain will do that. It'll make a computer-generated voice sound more natural over time. I think that the
true,
in the middle is really kind of telling that it's not a human, because the pauses are all wrong.
It's very slurry. That's right.
But it's so good for a cloned voice. I mean, wow, that technology's come a long way.
It really has.
Well, quick pause. Like, this is way less good than Adobe Voco was when they showed that back in 2016, right? Which ostensibly is the same thing, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Good question.
Adobe Voco basically give it a whole bunch of your target's sort of speech. So like if you were to give it a whole bunch of Barack Obama's videos or whatever from YouTube, and then you can just basically type some words and it will, having sort of like deep learning neural net, all the buzzwords, what I assume is just like coding black magic, will just make it sound perfect. And the examples that they showed at that 2016 thing were perfect, but within the context of this is Adobe selling their brand new product. So of course the thing that they're going to show everyone looks really, really perfect. Having said that, they talked about Adobe Voco like 4 years ago and it still hasn't materialized. So I don't know what is actually going on in that space. But they did way better than the one. Mind you, having said that, you had to give it 20 minutes of audio and you just typed like you gave it 50 words.
I just really want to hear a synthesized voice trained on someone who speaks a lot of African American English.
Wouldn't that be fun?
Heck yeah. Can we just all agree now as like us three, because we will of course be the tastemakers and decision makers in this process, that when we inevitably get to the future of like Star Trek and the Star Trek computer, we will make sure that it's Ave.
Yeah.
I'm like, that would just be so good.
Kelly, are you aware of any issues with speech synthesis? I read one thing, but I wonder if this hits anything that you're aware of.
Sure. Yeah. There's plenty. There are plenty of issues. I'm not as deeply engaged in like the NLP conversations, but I know a number of people, like graduate students, are trying to tackle this as part of their projects. It's very much an issue for all dialect speakers. They just don't have enough, I think, well-transcribed speech samples that are accurately transcribed.
Yeah. I remember reading back in March that speech recognizers, if the speaker is black, they misidentified 35% of the words on average, compared to white people's 19%.
Yikes.
So there's definitely a gap there, definitely a divide.
And both of those numbers are bad as well. That's the other thing that I want to, like as in...
1 in 5 words at best?
Yeah, that is not good. We need to, again, if we want the Star Trek computer, we have work to do.
Well, I'll move on. Let's see. This one is from Jin Lee and a team at The Ohio State University, published in the journal Scientific Reports, and I'm just going to read the top line here. Human brains are pre-wired to read words.
What does pre-wired mean?
Yeah.
Good question.
There's some interesting work on this. I guess it's about shape recognition. So the idea that there are these primary shapes in nature, like a T or like a thing like occlusion, so you can see that something is behind something else. So that mechanism that we already had evolved got co-opted into reading. And so now we are born knowing how to read. I mean, having the mechanism ready to learn to do that task.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because that's what I kind of arrived at as well. I thought, now, writing has only been around for 5,000 years at most, but a lot of languages are not written. They're signed or they're oral only. And so how would this have taken root? But then I kind of arrived at the same place you did, that part of our brain got good at shapes a long time ago for some reason, and that's kind of why writing often takes the form it does instead of being like something else.
Isn't that sort of true for everything we do that's new and difficult? Like the example that I always say to my students when I'm explaining to them that we're essentially just monkeys who wear shoes is we're one of those old 1980s brick cell phones that's our hardware, that's our brain, and we have just kept installing ever more advanced software onto it, but the fundamental hardware is still pretty much the same.
And then there's this one part of the phone that doesn't do anything anymore, we've moved on from there, and so the phone figures out how to make that archaic piece turn into doing something else. Like
when you are coding for laptops or whatever and you've got limited resources, or the people at NASA who had to try and make bloody computers run on a couple of bytes up in the 60s, you have to be lean, right? So whatever's in there, whatever you can use, it's one of those everything but the oink situations, right? where the brain's well, we're good at shapes. Let us kind of look shapey, so that's what we're going with.
Instead of smells.
Yeah, right? What's the closest? Okay, the shape thing. We'll use the shape bit.
So they looked at babies who haven't learned to read yet, obviously, and put them through an fMRI machine. Yum, yum. And they were looking at a part of the brain known as the visual word form area. Boy, this is an interesting area, and there's been a lot of stuff about it. It's a part of our brains that's good at identifying writing, although some work has it down for more general vision processing. And they found that those bits tie in really strongly to language bits, Broca's area, Wernicke's area, and some other stuff.
There's a really good book on this. It's by Stanislas Dehaene, which I just really enjoy saying. It's called Reading in the Brain. And it's very approachable. It's smack dab in between a textbook and pop linguistics.
Oh, awesome. Thank you for that. Mm-hmm. Let's talk theoretical. So when I read that headline that the brain is pre-wired, in fact, I'll even read their comment. Humans are born with a part of the brain that is pre-wired to be receptive to seeing words and letters, setting the stage at birth for people to learn how to read, a new study suggests. That's from the Ohio State University press release. And there are two schools of thought in linguistics that sometimes come up against each other. The idea that at least some aspects of language are innate, and there's something about the human brain that latches onto language specifically. Learning language is not just like learning anything else.
What do we call that school again?
Nativism.
Uh-huh.
And then another idea that language is instead learned pretty much just like other things. You learn language because you learn skills and concepts that build up to language. And we've kind of taken the second view on this show, but this study, this work hits up against it by saying, well, not only are speaking and signing special, but reading is too.
Is it saying that though? Like,
well,
this is what I have.
Kind of is.
This is what I have with the issue of like pre-wired though. Like it's saying that our brain is good at some things, and that reading. It seems like there's a Venn diagram in the this study is presenting a Venn diagram. One circle is like shit our brain is good at, and the other circle is like shit you need to be able to read. And there is an intersection where like those two things. It doesn't mean that your brain has been set up to read. It means there's stuff in your brain that gets co-opted for reading readily, right?
Okay, but either way, it still means brains are kind of language ready in ways that aren't predictable by sort of a generalized, undifferentiated language is just other stuff too.
Okay, sure. I would buy that insofar as like our brains are language ready and most other animals aren't, because we've tried really hard to give them language and it just doesn't seem to take.
I'm of course like I always find myself in the like why not both school. So I guess I maybe lean more nativist in that I often think about how we did so much to our bodies so that we could like become speakers, right? I mean, it's part of being like upright, forward facing, bipedal, like mammals. We don't have to relearn how to stand up and walk upright every generation, right? Like there are parts of our biology that make us bipedal, that make us forward facing, that have like this whole sensory array in the front of our bodies to experience the world. So I feel the same way about our language faculty in that over time in our biology, it has become wired to expect us to interface with the built environment in the ways that we do. And so I take a lot of my thought on that from epigenetics, right? That like our genes carry some of our experiences, right? That there's part of our memory that goes into the next batch, as it were.
I guess also, like, you've just completely convinced me to your school, and I now think exactly the way you do. If enough generations have passed for our bodies to change substantially, like, surely enough has for our brains as well, right?
I say yes, but lots of people say no.
Yeah,
well, they're wrong, including me, including 30 seconds ago me. What an idiot that guy was.
But I think it's interesting that when we're talking about the language faculty, you mentioned a lot of the same things that I would, bipedalism, large brain size, human vocal tract. But when people talk about nativism often, like, let's take Chomsky for a minute in his book, Why Only Us, he argues that language was possible because of a mutation that allowed us to do syntax, which is not quite the same thing as, well, we're bipedal and we live in social groups and those things changed our bodies and made language possible. I mean, would we take it that far?
I don't know. I've given a lot of thought to this. I'm really interested, and I wrote a paper on like the first merger, which would be like Chomsky's, thing of like merge. We evolved merge. I think there are definitely some other things like the complex I, that kind of started as a random mutation that then became useful. And so our, biology kept a hold of it and continued to refine it. Yeah, I'm very much of the why not both. Like we have this really interesting mutation that happens to be useful, and it happens to be useful for like the construction of human society. So now Chomsky's like bored.
Oh no, you did it. You turned him off. By the way, can I just say, I have not followed the latest Chomsky stuff where did he essentially say that sociolinguistics is just not very interesting and isn't real linguistics?
Probably. I wasn't on Twitter that day.
You miss a lot if you're not paying attention around here.
It's true.
Okay, I'm going to go to the next thing. And this one is, we have to say goodbye to a great type designer, Ed Bengat, who passed away at the age of 92. He was an incredibly influential type designer. His most influential typefaces were his revival of Souvenir, Bengat, the one that had his name, Bengat Gothic, Tiffany. You would know his work from the title card of the show Stranger Things.
Oh, he did like the what I've always thought of as the Stephen King pulp novel font.
Yeah, it's influenced by Art Nouveau. It's called Bengat, and I always think of the A as especially distinctive because the crossbar isn't straight. It's like sloping. And it's cool. It's a good look.
I'm really trying, Daniel, but when you talk about crossbars sloping, like, fuck, man.
Wait till
You're just
I get
leading
into
with
it.
the jaw.
Oh, no. Okay, fine. I'm going there. Tiffany. All right. I want you to imagine a big old letter E, all right? And then it's got little serifs, but it doesn't have tiny wimpy serifs, the little hangy downy bits that give your eye something to lock onto. It had big fat triangular serifs that just go every which way in just the perfect dimensions. Mwah. Here's an interesting thing. He worked on 600 typefaces, and before he became a designer, he played drums with Woody Herman and with Stan Kenton.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
I'm very sad to hear that this man has died and
too.
that his fonts, by the sound of it, were very good.
Yes, they were good. I mean, his work seems a little dated and fusty now, but it probably is because his typefaces are anchored in the 70s and 80s because of the enormous popularity and utility that they had. So,
Hey, look, when we're 92 and people are listening to our podcast, I'm sure they're going to be like, oh, this sounds dated.
it is, but that's the nature of the thing.
Yep.
So, Vale Ed Bengat. And thanks to Bob on our Discord channel for alerting us to that one. That was a great find.
Come hang out on our Discord. There is a marked lack of alt-right white supremacist agitation taking place in our Discord.
Yeah, there's not much of it at all. It's really good. We'd love to see more of you. We are back on Because Language, and we are here with Kelly Wright of the University of Michigan, a scholar whose work embraces language and race. In fact, you are sociolinguistics on Twitter, are you not?
That's right. Ratiolinguistic.
Sociolinguistic,
It
no
was
S.
too long.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's why we didn't get Because Language.
Curse you, word limit or character limit.
The thing that made me think of you and your work was, and it seems like a long time ago, it was a Twitter drama. Everything's a Twitter drama because Twitter is essentially a video game where you try to rack up as many followers as possible without destroying yourself. Few make it. But it was the LSA, the Linguistic Society of America, who have made a number of strange self-owns on social media, like using a photo of someone who didn't know that they were using their photo. They were just sitting there at a conference and got snapped, and then there you are on the LSA's website.
There was the letter.
There was their response to the LSA open letter. They referred once to an Aboriginal language as ancient. Ooh. And this week, they linked to a New York Times article, how shall I describe it, that kind of downplayed white supremacy. I don't know if you read the article, Kelly.
I did. It's, yeah. The LSA. So I guess, like, full disclosure, I am the editor's assistant at the journal Language.
Yep, cool.
I am not officially employed by the LSA, but I do work for the journal. And so
Okay.
I'm part of the small cadre of people that knows things, I guess, about how the LSA works.
Oh, shoot. Okay, then let me guess. Can I guess?
Yeah.
There's at least 2, maybe 3 groups of people that have differing agendas and they don't talk to each other.
I mean, yup.
Congratulations, Daniel.
You
You've literally just encapsulated every like body of creatures that has like more than 5 people in it.
Fine.
And also, I guess, like, as far as the social media presence, I mean, I'm honestly, it's like 2 people, one of whom is an intern who is incredibly underpaid, right?
Yes.
So I
But that's
can't
good.
like feel too bad about like this person who is a non-specialist, like a person who is a non-specialist and an intern sharing things that aren't great, that like, and they've had a history of doing this, right? Like on their Facebook page, like forever. I mean, pretty much every popular article that they link to is like either pseudoscience or, isn't actually quoting any linguists. And yeah, that's of course like this, we'll talk about this New York Times article, I guess, but it's, the same thing that the New York Times has been doing all summer, where they actually interview people on like one side of an argument and then just quote things out of context from the other side. It's like, talk to a Black person, like just find a Black person and speak to them. Like that's all I want. And
this is not rocket surgery.
Yeah. And so the LSA, I guess they're struggling. I was just we did a webinar for them, me and four other people, about how to be a linguist on social media. And it was kind of like,
that was an awesome session.
Oh, thanks. Thanks. And it was like, this was for y'all. And then like next week they're like, but you didn't listen.
Yep.
I think whenever I see this, whenever I see an entity handballing their arguably primary outward-facing message platform to like some poor underling, I'm like, I'm sorry, the statute of limitations on not getting it have elapsed, right? Like that job that you are just like siphoning out to whoever you like can make do it, as opposed to like who you hire to do it, is really important, and also not actually super easy. Like maintaining good personal sort of like message control and like brand identity. I don't want to get all like super duper like capitalist on it, right? But like when you are trying to represent yourself in an online space through messaging matters. Like I don't, it feels stupid to have to say it.
I'm just wildly shaking my head over here. Like,
as in, like, you disagree with me?
No, I totally agree with you.
I don't quite understand. I mean, I actually do understand. There's a bunch of old people who don't get it, and they're just seriously still aren't on board with the idea of like, this is the thing that everyone else sees of you. This is your billboard. This is your everything, right? Like, don't put that in the hands of an intern.
And this is not the part where we bash away at the LSA, because like what I came up with at the end of the open letter show was support the LSA, because this is a fight that we all need to be a part of. So I want to support this organization. It's one of the most significant professional organizations for linguistics. And yet we some of us are fighting white supremacy and some of us are making excuses for white supremacy. And that's hard.
Yeah, and I think that's it, is like the LSA came out with this statement. It started at the Institute in 2017 and was co-authored and co-produced by a number of minority members and signed on by every, member, almost every member who was registered at the LSA, which was like an incredible feat of organizing. And then for them to just like not care about it at all. Like they're like, so much of what they've shown this whole summer has just been like, that was empty. Like this was empty. And people are not having it, and we're not going to be having it. Right. So it's like, we need to keep organizing. Yeah, I'm convinced that our field is small enough for us to really make a difference, like to be an example to other fields of how to just be equitable.
Yeah, like you actually are nimble enough to be able to like just get people on board.
I hope so.
Well, let's talk about white supremacy for a second, because the gist of the New York Times article was that the definition of white supremacy is kind of changing. Yeah,
I would say that white supremacy is perhaps the thread that connects my various research projects. Yeah, I think what the New York Times article was really, I guess, what was being observed there is like, yes, this expanded definition of white supremacy. In my opinion, that is what white supremacy has always meant, right? So it's this idea, they're saying like white supremacy used to mean David Duke and, Strom Thurmond and like all these other folks. And it's like, no, those are white supremacists, right? White supremacy, right, is this like wider project. And these were the people who were standing up and championing championing it, right? So it's like, just like there's a difference between fascism and fascists, right? And like, the difference between like Santa Claus and like the spirit of Christmas, right? It's like, this, it's the same thing. So,
it sort of feels to me like the article's subtitle could have been like, white people are starting to hear rumblings that apparently white supremacy isn't exactly what we thought it was.
Yep, pretty much. I mean, that's
that's what it sounds like to me. Not like white supremacy's definition is changing, but it's like, hey, other white folk. So turns out, possibly, we've been thinking about this incorrectly.
Yep. I think that's exactly what you don't even need to read it. You summed it up pretty perfectly. Yeah, it was. And that's kind of how I felt, was like, no, it always meant this. Y'all just didn't know.
Yeah. Like so many things with white people, we're coming to the party so tragically unfashionably late.
We're a lot of work, that's for sure.
Yeah. So like, how does this relate to my research is it's maybe like a longer discussion, but I'm interested in lexical meaning. I'm interested in voices too, but I look at it like with my work in sports journalism and slurs and profanity generally, it is like, how do the prevailing ideologies of a time or like a particular shared event, something like 9/11 or World War I, right? Like, how do those things change how we use language? And so when we think about like the effects that white supremacy has over our language, I mean, white men named the heavens. White men named everything in the body, right? They named all the people and the places and stuff, right? And
so much of all of those places isn't just named by white men, it's named after white men as well. Like, there's a whole bunch of structures inside your female body that have actual men's names.
That's right. There's an empty space in my womb that's named after a man. There's all kinds of stuff. It's really great.
Braxton Hicks contractions.
Yeah, no, it's so true. You can't, so you think about like everything, right? I mean, any comparison or baseline or like norm or default in basically any scientific field. I mean, any institution has this background of being very much defined, described by white men and then later white people. So this era where people of color have been active in like naming and renaming and reclaiming things is like this very short window of lexical history. So we look at Oumuamua. Oumuamua was this like asteroid-like thing that came into our solar system this summer. And the reason that it's named Oumuamua is because it was, tracked by this telescope array in Hawaii. And part of them having this array on indigenous land meant that anything that was discovered had to be named with that like linguistic background.
Oh, that pleases me. Like in a place that just, what a great some Hawaiian is just so savvy to be like, hey guys, you guys, I've got a really, really great thing to add to this contract. Are you ready for this? All the shit in the sky is going to have Hawaiian names. How good is that?
I think it's great. And so, when we look at like white supremacy, I mean, we can really dig into some, I guess, specific like linguistic examples. So, I think just deficit models in general sort of pervade our descriptive history of linguistics. So you get something like
deficit models.
Yeah, so a deficit model is like something that is like a deviation from the typical is seen as like needing to be fixed or something that's like particularly exotic. So you have like the zero copula, like just that term to describe like Black English. So you have a construction like she workin', which means she has a job, right? And they call that a zero copula. But the only reason why it is a zero is because white language has one, right?
Yeah.
And
right.
So that's like a deficit model playing out in linguistic description.
And then if students come to school with African American English, then that's thought of, unfortunately, many times as some kind of problem that needs to be fixed.
Correct. And the supremacy of like writing over speech and sign, the supremacy of like formalism and curricular requirements. All of this is like larger and less agentive than I think people perceive it to be. The expansive definition of white supremacy is like a historical fact and a consequence of power, right? We get organization and colonization and industrialization and commercialization and globalization and standardization. That's all controlled by white people in power, right? So this ization suffix, right, that denotes the act or the process or the result of doing or making something. It's like all of the doing and the making was done by white people in power who were trying to actively suppress the lower classes and therefore in turn all people of color, all marginalized people. Anything that was kind of izated by white people is carrying a history of white supremacy.
Tell us about your work with sports language. How are the descriptions of white players different from the descriptions of black players or players of color?
Yeah, so my corpus is 8.5 million words. It tracks 120 athletes over 108 years. And I use that time depth in particular because I'm trying to look at these like ideological change moments over time, like the civil rights movement or like women's lib, to like see how that affects the semantic field. And so what I find is that white players are described with skill-based terms, like the ability to read plays, and like leadership skills. Whereas black players are described with like animalistic terms. So these things are like brute force, savagery, a lot of violence, a lot of physical strength.
Wow.
I've always wondered, and I'm a bit uncomfortable about using this word because I don't know if it's gone into the realm of things that we're not supposed to say anymore. But like, whenever in sports language in particular, directed towards people of color, I've always wondered if there's that really gross like negrophilia thing going on as well, right? Where there's almost like a kink fascination, right? Like it's so like animalistic and intoxicating, and it seems to me there's this undertone of like, I kind of want that.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It was explored for me really well in Get Out, for example, right?
Where I was just thinking of that.
Where all of these sort of white people, white supremacist individuals had this like weird, almost like it's less than me, but I want it and I'm going to have it. Did you find that there's an aspect of that going on in the language?
Absolutely. It's, so my master's thesis is about Serena Williams. And there's like this whole section in there that really traces that kind of like fetishization from like Mandingo fighting on slave yards. So this is like going back to Django Unchained, right? And just all the way through till today, especially with female black women's bodies. And the people, like, it really comes up in things like blogs where people are just like, look at her, she's so powerful and amazing, look at those thighs, look at all this. Whereas, like, obviously there's skill, like, this divide between, like, innate strength and skill, at this, like, white-black divide in sports journalism, it's just crazy to me.
Like, you'd be hard-pressed to point to a definitively more skilled and accomplished, like, sort of single athlete in any field, anywhere right now, right? Like,
yeah.
I don't know. I'm not a sports fan. I don't know the top 10 people who are good at their sports in the world, but you have to imagine she's in that list.
Well, and it's so fascinating because, so in 2017, I finished this work. This top word that has been used to describe her is unstoppable, that falls into this like racialized category. And the way that I trace that is by seeing like how it's applied to other actors, right? Like it doesn't occur in the white half of my corpus. And you have to imagine there is exemplars in the white half of your corpus who exist in a sort of comparable space, right? Absolutely.
White individuals who were absolutely sort of top of their field, incredibly skilled. And so I guess I'm making a point of it because a person listening to this podcast might kind of go, well, but like, hold on a second, Unstoppable doesn't have like a racialized dimension. And it's like, well, if it only gets used for black people, then yeah, obviously it does.
So I guess so 2 points. Like she named her fragrance line Unstoppable. So it's like she's used this word to describe her own product, which I think is insane. But you're absolutely right. Like the one thing that I have the most difficulty conveying to people when I talk about this work is that it's not negative. Racialization is not inherently negative. In fact, most of these words occur when people are trying to be like laudatory, when they're saying somebody did an amazing thing. It was so good. Let's describe how good it was.
And then you've got to have the conversation at parties with drunken idiots of like, positive stereotypes can still be really fucked up, dickhead.
Yeah, pretty much. So
tell me about your work with, I think the term that I've heard is redlining, keeping people of color out of certain neighborhoods, and how language is used to do that. That was part of your work as well, was it?
It is, yes. So redlining.
Is that the thing that comes from McDonald's, out of interest?
Redlining?
Yeah, I could have sworn I heard this in relation to McDonald's being black franchisees who were opening a McDonald's like had drastically lower options about where they could do it. Basically, if you were black and you wanted to franchise a McDonald's, they're like, okay, here's the black neighborhood you could go to. And I think they called it redlining. Anyway, sorry, digression.
No, that's absolutely so any type of property, that's exactly how redlining works. So any type of property that you need a loan for, right? This goes back to the creation of the FDIC. So our modern banking system, we created this option for people to get home loans. So this was like new after World War II. And they took individual auditors, like the way we think of like people who used to do the census and go like door to door. And they took notes on like every street in 750 American cities. And so these individual people were looking for specific things. You can like read the guidelines. And it is like toxic waste, industry, and black life. Like essentially like if any of those things were near or on your street, it was downgraded. And so red is like the lowest. It's like green, blue, yellow, red, 4 quantities. And red is the lowest. So if you lived in a red area or you wanted to start a business in a red area, you couldn't get a loan or it was much harder. And so black people, who at this first time had newly built generational wealth, essentially wasted that wealth, to try and build homes in the neighborhoods that they were allowed to do. And this is also the same era as like racially exclusive covenants. So at the same time, you have white flight from the cities because the inner city areas are downgraded. So people can't get loans to build houses in the city. They move out to the suburbs, and the suburbs have racially exclusive covenants. So the black people are confined to the city in places that are more expensive, and ignored, I guess, by other administrations, right? So you're not going to put schools there, and you're not going to put all this other, nobody is going to be reinvesting. So my work is now like, okay, it's been, 50 years, 50, 60 years. What do we see now? So redlining is like not an official federal. I always have to say that because it was the federal government that did this, policy, but covert segregation absolutely still exists. So what my research shows is not only does this discrimination extend to the voice alone? So people can be discriminated against in all of these ways that people are supposed to be protected against in the Fair Housing Act, but it happens just on the phone. And so not very many people use phones anymore, I know, but I called.
To be fair though, like when you are dealing with a government bureaucracy, you do.
Yeah.
Yes. That's the other thing. Like a lot of people don't use phones between other younger people, but fuck, if you're calling like the housing department, you're calling the housing department.
Yes. And so it's such a thing. So what I found was like very explicit evidence of steering, which is explicitly illegal. So that is like I call about a property that's perhaps in like one of those upper tier neighborhoods, like a blue or green neighborhood. and they point me back towards the Black community when I'm using the Black voice. So like, yeah, this place is great, but here's like some negative things about it. Maybe you'd want this other place. Here are some positive things about it, but that other place is in the back in the Black neighborhood. So yeah. And that study also like included, some attitudinal assessments of my voices. These are all my native dialects too. So it's my voice the whole time.
Oh, gee. Okay.
Yeah, it's really hard. It was really hard. So people find like the Black voice to be less trustworthy, less educated, less confident sounding than the other two whiter voices. So the third dialect I'm using is Southern American. I'm from Appalachia.
So you're tri-dialectical?
That's right.
Wow. I'm fighting every impulse in my brain to be the kind of fuckstick who then immediately demands that you do those things. I'm not going to do that. Yeah. But that is really cool sounding.
Thanks for not asking me to do.
You're welcome.
They're on my website. If anyone wants to hear my voices, they're on my website.
I got sick of doing it. I recorded it. Go find it.
It's actually weird. Yeah, it was really hard to hear people I guess just like open myself up to discrimination every day. That's like part of the reason why I'm not continuing this work now into my dissertation is just, it was like emotional trauma.
That's crushing.
Yeah, it was hard. And I don't know how, like, I now understand why no one replicated this study for 20 years.
Yeah, okay. Wow. So if we're talking about white supremacy in language, we're talking about a number of language ideologies that hold standardized English up as the standard, that serve to reward language that is identified as white and punish language that is identified as Black. And that it just seems to show up in so many other ways. It shows up in media, in education, economics.
Yeah, I mean, pick your example. And it really is like spoken standard English, because signed languages are absolutely discriminated against in this way. Any non-white language is discriminated against in this way. In our Constitution in the U.S., whiteness is equated to language. There's a couple talks that I have floating around out there where I talk about this in detail, but white person does not refer to color of skin, but instead an understanding built in the common parlance and literature. So whiteness equals language, equals standardized language. And so when you dig into like individual naturalization cases in the United States, you find people who are more dark-skinned but more affluent sounding being allowed to come into the United States as a citizen, and other people from like the same heritage being rejected because they have an accent.
And I think of that as happening in Australia as well, where in my lifetime, the White Australia policy used language as an exclusionary tool to keep certain people out. And in fact, now they're trying to bring back a citizenship test and an English test where, if there are some people who will do really well, like there are people for whom English is well-known, well-studied, people have a lot of exposure to English. And then there's another group where English is happening, but you have to work at it. English is in the mix, but it's one language out of many. And there's going to be a difference in the skin color between Group A and Group B.
Yeah, it's shocking.
I mean, just really quickly on the Australian language test in regards to like citizenship, I can't help but feel like there are Aboriginal Australians who would not meet that standard, to which, for my money, means that standard can't possibly be a standard. If the traditional custodians of the land don't pass your language test to belonging in the country, your language test is broken.
Your language test sucks. And then here we are in the academy where you are writing in academic English.
Yeah, it's such a thing. So I've taught writing and linguistics for a number of years now, and it is always so very difficult to do this in a writing classroom where it's like, okay, we're going to talk about how messed up standard English is, and like here are all the history, but I still have to prepare you to use it. That is like my charge in this course. It's my learning objective. And it's become a very like murky ethical space for me that I feel very uncomfortable in.
I was actually going to ask you exactly the same thing. So I deliver a unit called academic writing, and yeah, I exist in exactly the same space. And I've sort of broadly tried to take the same tack, which is like, this is fucked up, but it's powerful. So do you want to learn it? Kind of thing. And yeah, I'm like you. I'm like, I don't know if I'm doing a good thing here.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I struggled with teaching my students that all varieties of language were valid. And then when it came to marking...
Yeah. Now, to get a good mark, of course, only do this.
That's yeah. Could you please perform whiteness for me? Yeah, and I actually toyed with the idea of if someone wants to do assignments in Aboriginal English or, I don't know, how far do I take it? In learner English? Can I do that? I want to do that, but can I do that?
I mean, I do.
Do you?
I honestly haven't had that many students take me up on it, right? I mean, at the University of Michigan, our students want to learn how to participate in all of these very professional spaces, and so they're into
right.
it.
And you feel like you at least I feel, and I don't know if you share this, like you feel compelled to help the students who are learning from you do the thing that they're trying to do, right?
Yeah, I've taken grammar as like a writing teacher would call it, like out of assessment. So I'll give people comments on their grammar if they want them, if they opt in, I guess. But it's never part of the grade. I started teaching writing in a rhetoric program. And so I very much tell them, it's about an audience. Any communicative endeavor is about understanding your audience. If your audience isn't going to understand the variety that you're using and you have a point that you want to get across, you would need to change the shape of your argument. So a lot of the assignments that we do, involve like working, my writing class like takes like one project through 4 stages, and they redesign it for a different modality each time. So it's like you have an essay, but then you have an essay, but then you have a website, but then you have a podcast. So that's like, so, and in each modality change, your audience changes, and therefore the content of your writing changes. But that is my like sick and not satisfying workaround.
Well, it makes me happy that you're doing that. It makes me feel like I was kind of onto something, which is nice. But let's bring it back around to linguistics now, because that's where we kind of started. White supremacy shows itself in linguistics as a discipline as well. What have you noticed as far as that? Yeah,
I mean, aside from just the sheer numbers of white people in the discipline, I think that I really think one of the places where it stands out is just like curricular requirements across the discipline, like sociolinguistics and anything else like language and discrimination that might address some of these issues for students who are not going to be part of the professoriate in our discipline, right? Who are taking just one language class or a few language classes. It's absolutely absent. And that to me white supremacy has to be part of that. Now, I'm not saying that every person who's designing curriculum at like U.S. institutions is a white supremacist, but that our institutions are absolutely founded, as I was mentioning before, like they're built on this foundation, and therefore it's absolutely part of how they work, that like formalism is more important. Like, none of the formalists have to read my literature. So I had to do double work, I guess, just because I wanted to talk about social issues. And so therefore people can get an entire degree in linguistics without ever having to think about how language is used in society. And to me, that's white supremacy.
I can I offer just a sort of like a different disciplines? So my partner's a doctor. She also teaches medicine at university, and she talks about how like medical ethics comes in quite late in the course, and how she finds that endlessly infuriating. Like her sort of argument, and she has a far more articulate one than I'm about to present, but it basically boils down to shouldn't ethical decision making and like sort of like balancing the injustices visited upon BIPOC people kind of be the foundation stone through which all other knowledge that we're using in this course be like sort of pushed through? To which the resounding answer is like, no, shut up, go away. This is the boring, annoying stuff that we have to put in, basically. That's not entirely fair. I'm sure there's some very, very sensitive and articulate people in that world who are trying to sort of fight a good fight. But it strikes me that you're sort of like maybe nudging in a similar direction, whereby like everything that we study needs to acknowledge this.
I mean, even if you don't, you're absolutely right. And it's like, even if we don't want to teach like morphologists are like, what do I have to say about sociolinguistics? Like, just engaging with the history of the discipline is enough for you to address the presence of white supremacy in the field, right? Like missionary work and, anything you want to talk about, right? With like the early, founding of the field, right? It's like, I can't.
The thing with that as well is whenever I sort of make an argument like that, because these conversations obviously play out in lots of different fields and in lots of different settings, and the political is the personal and all that kind of stuff. And when sort of like I'm talking to lay people about this in totally non-linguistic contexts, and I say, yeah, but like Catholic missionaries pushed like as far as you can go into Australia and did some of this stuff. And they're like, yeah, but like, why are we still banging on about this? I'm like, the missions is still there. Like,
the past isn't past.
This happened in the living memory of people who could have this conversation with you who aren't me. Like, how else do I phrase that to you? Like, other than just basically being like, shut up, you're wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly that. Like, English-only policies still exist in the United States. Like, people, people go to jail because they aren't understood by a court transcriptionist, and therefore the juries, when things are read back, are not accurate. I mean, people die because healthcare workers don't think that, Black people exaggerate their pain, right? I mean, it's not... there are things happening right now that matter, that are tied directly to this history. And so, yeah, I feel like, to me, it's really hard for me to actually conceive of my future in this discipline. I mean, I love language so much that I'll never do anything else. But it's just hard for me to imagine like what my place will be, because it's very daunting, especially when I look at all of these people who I'm like, do you not realize like how fortunate you are to have this knowledge? Because nobody, we're not teaching linguistics in secondary school in this country. Like, I know there are other countries that are doing much better in that, but it's like people don't even realize how much power there is in their own voices, like, and how much it tells them about their history and their place in the world and their identity and all this stuff. Like, I just want individual people to understand how wonderful, voices and signs and like all these other things that we do with language are. Like, I just want to be able to flatten out like all the bad stuff and talk about the good stuff. But I can't, it can't just be on sociolinguists alone.
No.
And a handful of allies to do this work, right? And so I think we're getting there. I think we're at like a watershed moment, especially because we have like Anne Charity Hudley doing her fantastic work, and just a handful of other people who are really like on the vanguard. And it makes me feel, especially like being on Twitter, really, it makes me feel less alone, because I never would have been connected to these people and these efforts without a platform like that. And so
I think it's an important, I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I mean, for so many people, Twitter is just an architect of so much misery, right? And not even just misery, because obviously I'm sure Kelly, you can have all sorts of trauma visited upon you, like prior traumas revisited to you through Twitter. But more the idea of like, for so many people that I speak to, Twitter is a maelstrom that hope just pours into, right? Like it is a hope-sucking engine. So I'm so glad to hear that you're actually finding the flip side to that there's all of these wonderful, awesome voices doing such like great work.
Yeah, it's really actually been, it was the last place I ever expected to find a community. But I think too, for like BIPOC, like folks, like we're so scattered. It's like tokenization is real. We're all like alone in like departments. Like we're like, I'm the one here, you know? And so just being able to connect with those people like on Twitter and be like, okay, I'm not the only one who sees this. I'm not the only one who thinks this is crazy. Is just like, it's refreshing.
So just to share a personal, like from my field in a similar vein, I did a search on Facebook the other day. I was looking for I literally just searched feminist teachers, feminist educators, and anti-racist teachers and anti-racist educators, looking for like communities of people who like identify that way and like share ideas and stories and like share the load on how to like fight the good fight and all that kind of stuff. Nothing.
Oh my gosh.
Nothing out there, just crickets. Do you know the most hilarious thing? Those 4 search parameters were the ones that I looked with, and in all 4 of those searches, the closest thing I got to was the same feminist doctors group popped up in all 4, and I was like, well, good on you, medicine, or like those people within medicine trying to fight the good fight. Oh man, it really depressed me.
So it sounds like keep fighting, keep talking about this, stay connected. Any other tips for fighting white supremacy? Sorry, I don't mean to make this a listicle. But
No, what I mean, it's, I guess, you know, talking about like the ization of it all. I think that like white people need to be agents of, you know, like actualization and mutualization and normalization, in that we need to make not being white okay. That sounds like it's a very simple statement. Obviously, it's a generational task. But white people need to hear about these things from other white people. Because again, like this audience and like author relationship, it really weighs heavily on like our decision-making process and like our meaning-making process. So this comes from me knowing how like each iteration of an utterance is kind of taken into the brain, and then we like sort it out with our own personal experience, and we decide like, I care about that, or I don't care about that, or like, was that weird? It was weird. You know, like when you're sitting at night or like thinking through the things of your day. And so I feel like those moments where you can speak to someone who shares a background with you and then perhaps also has a differing opinion are much stronger for your own sort of like meaning making and decision making process. So that is why I say that white people need to do this work. Not because like I'm not engaged in doing it. I know a lot of people too are like, it's not my job to educate you. I actually do think it's my job to educate people. But I just think, we all need to be purposeful in seeking out knowledge and be agentive, in making changes to our thinking. Right. So I often point to, you know, like the politically correct movement, which people don't, I think about this lexically, where, you know, we got to like mail carrier and flight attendant, right? You had to, you know, and now like this larger conversation around pronouns that has been going on for a number of years now, it's like, you have to be agentive about changing your language use. And changing like how you feel about people using language in a way that's different from you. It doesn't take a lot of work, but it does take purposeful work to realign your thinking in that way. And so I challenge people to do that, to like speak up and speak out when they see inequality, and to be agentive in making changes to your thinking.
As a white, straight, cis, het dude, I know that other people like me will probably listen to me a lot more. They'll upweight my opinion for all the wrong reasons. But I am also at the same time probably very poorly educated, despite my best efforts. Probably I'm the most listened to and the least capable of doing this. And I find that one way that I do it is to pass the mic. For example, to you.
Yeah, I think it's great. I have really enjoyed this summer of folks like inviting me and getting to talk to lots of different audiences and hearing the questions they have. It's nice.
Kelly Wright of the University of Michigan, we're so glad to have you on to talk about these issues. We hope that our listeners have found something that they can take away from all of this discussion. And thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you both. This was so nice.
We didn't scare them away yet, but we're going to.
We're not done yet because we're doing Words of the Week.
Have you prepped, Kelly, for what this is, Daniel?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Great. Well, I was just wondering if I needed to explain the shit show that was coming.
I would like you to explain the shit show if you please.
All right. So, Word of the Week is where Daniel brings a bunch of words and we talk about them, and invariably it makes me, instantly transmogrify into a very grumpy 85-year-old person.
Oh, Ben, you're always like that.
It's true.
You just don't know it. Kelly, have you got a word for us?
I do, I think.
Yay.
I think. Oh.
I picked SARS.
Oh, interesting.
Okay.
Which is back in the news because of the conflict in Nigeria.
What?
Oh, yes, the police force.
Yes, the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, or SARS, and Nigeria is protesting against them because they're essentially just an armed mob that has been terrorizing people for a while. And so I saw SARS and SARS back in the news, and I was like, not another pandemic. I cannot handle it.
Oh, God, please. That's exactly what I thought.
But it's in fact a more, even more depressing thing. So you're welcome. I started us off on a terrible footing.
Thank you. I've got another one from Bob, also on our Discord channel. I wonder if you caught the video of U.S. Senator David Perdue mocking Kamala Harris's name in a stump speech. I don't even think I'm going to play the audio because it was just so juvenile.
You know what? I'm going to unmute this video right now so I can hear it. Oh, God. Oh, God. Yeah. I mean...
Just stop.
It's just the... I know I say this every week when I say it again. I see that in my job. And in case this is the first time you've listened to the show, my job, at times, is wrangling 13-year-old fucking idiots. That is the caliber of quote unquote burn that this dick stain of a human being is busting out.
That's a U.S. Senator, Ben.
Yes.
I can't handle it. It's so disrespectful.
Exactly. Confession time. I have really had to sit down and train myself to put stress on the first syllable for Kamala.
Oh, yeah.
Because it didn't come naturally to me, and I don't know why. But I felt bad about it, and now I'm working to do better.
But you tried. That's the point.
I think I can guess why, because you probably don't have heaps of experience with South Asian names.
Fair enough.
But that's cool. Just learn, which is what you did.
Well, that's it. Just freaking learn. Anyway, in response, writer Anand Giridharadas tweeted this: call it what it is, not mispronunciation. And here's our word of the week: dispronunciation. He wrote an article in The Ink, Kamala versus Daenerys. And here's what he writes: the obvious word for what Perdue did is mispronunciation, but I would like to correct that. The proper term is dispronunciation. Consider that misinformation is information that merely happens to be false, whereas disinformation is false information purposely spread. Similarly, mispronunciation is people trying too feebly and in vain to say our names, and dispronunciation is people saying our names incorrectly on purpose as if to remind us whose country this really is. He goes on, mispronunciation is a matter of limited tongues. Dispronunciation is a matter of limited hearts.
I like that.
I guess not getting names right is just another way of not trying, but I think it's more than that. It's a way of communicating who belongs and who doesn't, who's authentically American or Australian or whatever, and who isn't, and really ultimately, who that person thinks matters in society.
Can I ask both of you a question, hey, people who have to do a job that's like ostensibly similar to mine insofar as you are regularly introduced to a fresh batch of human beings, all of whom have very different names, and you have to learn them. What's your play when you hit a name you're sort of unfamiliar with or you're not confident with, and you try and sort of you ask the person how to pronounce their name, and then you struggle? Because I always feel like I'm always very scared of feeling like I'm putting that person on the spot and sort of spotlighting them in a way that makes them feel unsafe and unwelcome by like going, sorry, what? I'll try again. I'll try it again. What do you guys do?
Yeah, so I actually just had this like very awkward exchange with a friend who I was like, so I said your name in a talk, and then somebody messaged me and said I said your name wrong, which is like not maybe the way I would suggest going about it. But,
oh no, this is much worse than I was expecting.
Yeah, but I called them on the phone and I was like, hey, I have to ask you something. Can you please tell me, like, am I saying your name wrong? And they had me say it and then gave me like this whole wonderful like history of their name. Aww. And so we practiced it together, which was so kind because I felt terrible even bringing it up.
How long had you been doing this to this poor person?
I guess twice in like a big public venue had I said their name incorrectly, but it was really more of a stress thing than like all of the sounds were right, which is good. But I think that, yeah, it's hard to have those conversations, but I'm always going to be the person to, I guess, ask. I had heard their name pronounced and was pronouncing it the way someone else did. But that was also wrong. So I think you have to just like go to the source and try and tell people like, I'm trying to do this because I want it to be good. And I think a lot of people are really like understanding of it. There's a great Twitter thread recently, by Anpu London. That's ANPU London, who about like my ethnic name and like how to pronounce it and like what it means and like all of this like history, that's behind like why some sounds sound foreign and why some sounds don't. So yeah, anyway, it's a good like primer from a person with a name like that about how to approach them.
We will put that up on our blog, becauselanguage.com. Last one, fail son. Have you heard this word?
Fail son. So son is in like human male progeny?
Yes.
Okay.
Failson. Take a guess, Ben, as to when this word comes from, and it's only just recently gained prominence.
Failson.
And it kind of means what you'd expect.
Like you're a fail son.
An epic fail son.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it stinks of a sort of like a meme heritage to me. So I'm going to say late, like right around 2010, and it's probably coming from 4chan.
Damn, Ben, your instincts are good.
No, fuck off, really?
Well, okay, so I felt it was like a late 1800s thing.
Oh, okay.
Did you get that sense, Kelly?
It does sound older than it is.
It's 2016. It's 2016. It comes from...
It's a great word.
It comes from the podcast Chapo Trap House, which I have never listened to. The reason this is on my mind is that Caitlin Moriah on Twitter says, Dear American Dialect Society, if one of the contenders for Word of the Year is not Failson, in this, the year of the Failson, I do not know if I will ever recover. So Gia Tolentino did a piece in the New Yorker, What Will Become of the Dirtbag Left? And she writes, for white middle-class male useless people who have just enough family context to not be crushed by poverty, they become fail-sons. And the folks from Chapo Trap House use it to describe their audience, but I've been watching it creep up the social scale to describe incompetent sons of very wealthy people. And I'm thinking of two in particular, but there are others.
Okay, so I'm just trying to sort of follow the etymology here. So it started out just sort of like where all of the sort of like middle-class white dudes sort of like soft land themselves.
Yes, that's right. You never succeed in establishing yourself. You're just a fail son.
Right. But you also but
you're
also,
fine.
yeah, right. Like you will live out your days in just like boring, crushing mediocrity, having never really suffered anything.
Correct.
As a mediocre white man, I would just like to say yes.
Okay, good. Cool.
But I feel like it's moving from middle class to upper class. Is that a sense that anyone else is getting?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
I mean, it seems like the zeitgeist is right for this to sort of like leapfrog its way from the middle class to the upper class when we can look at like, what the fuck is the name of that family who made OxyContin? Whereby like you can basically be like proved to be single-handedly responsible for like 500,000 people's deaths and still be like, nah, well, okay, sorry. And also we'll keep all our money now.
Failing upward is a
Yes,
hallmark.
exactly. That's what I mean. Like failing upward, like a series of just like being shit and still elevating.
Yeah, I mean, I think about like how much of my our undergraduate student population on this campus are fail sons.
What are you doing here? I don't know. Isn't this just didn't you all get on the bus from your high school at the end that came here? Isn't that what you did?
I'm a business major.
So, SARS, dispronunciation, and fail son are words of the week. Let's get some comments from previous episodes. One of our words of the week last week was shit show.
Oh, yeah, that's right. We were looking for, because it came from the Beta Meinhof trials, and we were looking for the original German because we only had the transcript. Did we get one?
We got one.
Yes! Thank you, German speakers in our listening audience. I really wanted to know this. What is it?
This one comes from Mai and from Adam. The phrase was Scheißtheater, theater.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. That makes heaps of sense.
The actual quote was, Wir wollen das Scheißtheater nicht mehr. Sorry about the pronunciation. I'm not a German speaker.
And what does that actually translate to?
Okay, so this is the interesting part. This is a calc, a word-for-word translation, but it doesn't have the exact same meaning in German. Adam and Mai have mentioned that Scheiß here isn't actually... it's more like shitty, like an intensifier.
Right, okay.
This shitty car, which doesn't actually have any poop in it. It's just a shitty car. Or fucking is another. And then theater has connotations of theater, but also of drama, like fuss and bother, something that's been drummed up.
Well, but this is coming from the Beta Meinhof trials, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So they're referring to the trials as like political theater.
Yeah, that's right. Kabuki is the word that I sort of came up with, right?
Right.
Whereas in English, shit show is like a catastrophically shambolic event, not necessarily a goddamn fuss.
No. Yeah, a shit show in the English usage is like if Murphy of Murphy's Law fame came in and had a decision-making capacity in every creative choice in a theatre production, right? Like,
it'd be a shit
just
show.
Fucked it the whole way through.
All right, so mystery solved on that one.
Thank you, Mai and Adam. Oh, man, that filled a hole I had forgotten was there.
Yeah. Javier wrote us about our discussion of irregardless and how it's a bit like other words that have a negative prefix that is an intensifier. It seems superfluous, but it's actually intensifying things like unthaw and unravel. Javier says, in Spanish, we use descambiar. Let's just break that down. Des is dis, and cambiar is change. To change? Javier says, if you're not happy with an item you just bought, you go back to the shop and unswap it for a different one.
Oh.
What? You swap, right? Yeah, but unswap is an intensifier there.
Okay. So unswapping something. So in that, could you swap something?
Yeah, you could swap it. You could cambiar it. Yeah, you could.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but if you descambiar it, then it's stronger. And Javier says, this word is frowned upon by many, but I find it very useful and funny.
Not unlike irregardless.
Any feels, Kelly, on irregardless?
I think it's really amusing how upset people get about it.
Yes, this is where I'm at with it as well. I don't say irregardless. I don't hate anyone who says irregardless, but I tremendously enjoy laughing at people who hate people who say irregardless. I'm just like, oh, that is a level of pettiness that is so powerful. I'm kind of impressed.
Yeah, I kind of feel that way about most of these, like, I hate this word because of this reason discussions. Of course, we all have our own, but it's like you have.
That's the thing, right? I'm sitting there going, yeah, but if someone's disorientated, that
You've got to find something else to care about.
I mean, I don't have any of those things, but,
liar. Liar.
You'll never get it out of me.
This is the thing. When you don't own up to it, Daniel, right? You are perpetuating a problem. You're stuccoing over the hole you've punched in the wall a really long time ago, but it's not a good fix, Daniel. It's not a good fix.
I'm reminded of the quote, our dark side is not our bad side. Our dark side is the side that we refuse to acknowledge exists.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah.
Nice.
Wow. Thank you for proving my point to me.
Well, you'll never find out what it is. Finally, Marie on Twitter just posted to us this tweet from Sylvia at sociolinguista. Accidentally just coined a new blend, disoppressing, which is a combination of disappointing and depressing. Really should be the 2020 word of the year. Gosh, we're going to get into word season soon, aren't we?
We are.
I'm doing that. I'm working on the word of the year. With
Oh my goodness!
Oh, dang.
I'm excited.
We just found out that for the last hour and a half we've been like having a social drink with the person in charge of picking the best picture at the Oscars, and now we have to pretend like we aren't just gonna just fucking bombard you with questions.
That's fine. I am not. I'm not in charge. I'm just helping run the Zoom.
Yeah, but you have seen some words.
I have. I love disoppressing because it's like when you get a new blend like that and you're like, I felt it.
Yeah.
I felt it. Especially like we were on strike at the beginning of the semester, and yeah, my whole experience with the administration has been disoppressing.
Oh.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like at least I have a word for it now.
Yeah.
That's something. That's something.
That's some fucked up silver lining shit right there.
Thank you.
Kelly Wright, thank you so much for joining us on this show. We've really enjoyed having you.
Thank you guys. It was really nice.
Please come back.
Okay.
Yeah. We love return guests. So much fun.
Okay.
Because now you've like managed to like that initial sort of thing that I'm sure you had, which was like, the fuck, has hopefully either mostly waned or at least you've learned to ignore enough of it now so that by the time you come in for round 2, it's just kind of like, oh yeah, these guys are fucking weird. All right.
Cool. Ready.
Sounds good.
Oh, do you know what that music means, Ben?
Oh, do I have to do the reads?
It's time for the reads.
Send your reactions and ideas to us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Mastodon, and Patreon. We are Because Lang Pod in all of the places. And if you can get a question to us via email, the email address you would want is hello@becauselanguage.com. Tell friends about us, leave a review. All of those things help us tremendously.
We're really grateful to our patrons for making this work easier and helping us stretch to some goals that we like to do. A special thanks to Termi, Chris B, Lissa the Major, Chris L, Matt, Whitney, Damien, Helen, Bob, Jack, Christelle, Elias, Michael, Larry, Kitty, Lord Mortis, Bin, Christopher, Dustin, Andy, Mai, Nigel, Kate, Jen, Nasrin, Aisha, Emma, Andrew, Nikolai, and new this week, Samuel. A big thanks to all of our patrons. Our music is written and performed by Drew Kraplyanov, and you can hear him in Ryan Bino and Didion's Bible. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time. Because Language.
Bow, 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 bow.
Actually, it was kind of funny because I was at the library talking to my daughter saying, let's go to the car and get the library books so that we can return them and get more books. And then there was this woman who was looking at me really funny. And then she said, you're Daniel from the ABC Radio Perth doing the language show.
Oh, you got the thing where for a second you were cool. Isn't it weird?
It was lovely, and she was lovely, and it was still strange.
Yeah, I don't care for it at all either. It's like, it feels, I don't know about you, but I just have ferocious imposter syndrome when someone, and it's super rare. Like, I don't want to, because I'm sure you'll use this in a promo somewhere, so I really, really don't want to come across as the person like, yeah, when I'm like just besieged by my adoring fans, because that is not at all the correct characterization. Like, once every year or so, someone's like, hey, you're you sound really familiar. Who are you? It's like, oh, I'm this person from the thing. And they're like, oh, yeah, I really like your show. And I'm like, but you shouldn't, because I'm bad. I'm bad at all of this stuff. Like, there's so many better podcasts out there. Just stop it. Get away from me. And then invariably, everyone leaves the situation far less happy than they started it.
I'm the person from the thing. That's how you introduce yourself?
Yeah, totally.
It works.
No, usually what happens, I'm like, I'm a high school teacher, because usually that clears that up actually a fair bit more readily than the actual podcast. And then after a while of like, no, it's not that. I was like, oh, I used to be into bikes or whatever. And then after a few things, I'm like, I'm on a linguistics podcast. And they're like, oh, yeah. And I want to be clear as well. I'm not at all ashamed of being on Because Language. I freaking love the show.
Yeah.
Like, this is the best.
Yeah.
But I always, I just don't know. I've like my shoulders hunch up. I'm like, I do a podcast. And the worst part is, I reckon, and then I'll shut up completely and we can just, I don't know, do a show or something.
Thank you.
But the worst part is like, I have been doing this now for like 6 years. So for like way longer than the whole like pop culture, like everyone has a podcast now kind of thing. And it doesn't make me OG or anything. Like, you would think we would be far more successful for having done it that long. But
I would think
like, I don't even belong to the fresh cadre of like, everyone has a podcast people. I'm like the OG forgotten about podcast people. So I'm just like, oh, it's so self-conscious when I'm like, I have a podcast.
Well, I'm just impressed that you have imposter syndrome and you're not even doing a PhD.
Oh, Daniel, all educators can have imposter syndrome.